Hello, this is BSJ, and this video is going to be all about how to itemize Ursa. So when it comes to playing Ursa, like every other hero in the game, it's really important to understand his starting items. Something I've been favoring a lot lately, and something you should think about every lane, though, going into before you make this decision, is am I going to be against a solo offlaner where I'm going to play aggressive, or am I going to be in a lane that I have to play really scared? And Ursa is one of those heroes that's incredibly hyperpolarized in this scenario. And what I mean by that is you're either going to be able to hit the guy and benefit from Fury Swipes trading, which means you're going to dominate the lane, or you're going to be against some dual lane, like Slardar Omni Knight or Spirit Breaker Omni Knight, something that you just can't walk into as an Ursa. And if that's the case, then the lane's going to have to play completely differently. So if you're in an aggressive lane, I've been really favoring Windlace. What I've looked at as Ursa is a lot of heroes require items in order to be aggressive. And Ursa is one of those heroes that heavily benefits from like move speed with the phase boots, but he doesn't need a damage item. His pretty much only requirement is that he's able to be aggressive, and with that being said, it's pretty much health. And he doesn't build early health items. You want to go, phase boots, plus like maybe a stick or, any other item in the laning stage, such that you don't want to have to rush, like a ring of regen towards your Vlads or like a Morbid Mask. So I like to go a ton of regen in Ursa's starting item builds. Even if he's not getting pressured in lane, I'll just use the salve to kill a big camp. Generally, my starting item will be 2 sets of tangos, a salve, and a windlace, if I feel like I'm going to be against a solo offlaner. The reason why I say windlace is Ursa's a 310 base movement speed hero, and most offlaners are anywhere between 300 and 320. And heroes that are 300, if they're really smart, would build boots or a windlace against Ursa for the exact reason I'm talking about, because Ursa's job is to hit you. That's how he wins the lane, if he's able to hit you. And so for Ursa, that's the movement speed. And so if they're slower than you and they build a windlace or boots, you pretty much keep up with them or remain faster than them. And if they're a hero that's naturally faster than you, then you become faster than them, unless they build those exact items. And even then, the windlace is just so nice on him in the early stages of the game. Because like on other heroes that want to build, Quelling Blade for last hitting or Blightstone for damage, he builds windlace because he does plenty of damage on his own. He just needs to be able to hit the person. If I'm in a more passive lane, I'll build a lot of regen because I want to be able to sustain the lane, and instead of a windlace, I'll have a stout shield. Most lanes, I don't prioritize Poor Man's Shield all that much, unless I'm against like 2 melee heroes that's primary form of harass is right-clicking. Poor Man's Shield, in my opinion, is more of like a passive lane item, meaning like all I want to do is get past the lane. I'm like not in a good lane, the ones I kind of talked about, like the Omni Knight, Spirit Breaker, that kind of stuff. Because if I'm aggressive, I don't need the Poor Man's Shield to win the trades. A lot of heroes build Poor Man's Shield so that they can be aggressive and win trades, but Ursa doesn't need that. He just wins trades through Fury Swipes. So Poor Man's Shield's more of a defensive item, and if I build the Windlace in my original starting items, then I'm going to build a Stout Shield as soon as possible. The only reason I buy the Windlace before the Stout Shield is because you can't buy the Windlace at the side shop. I get that Stout Shield because Ursa has high base armor, but if he wants to be aggressive and trade within a creep wave, he can't afford to lose the trade because he doesn't have a Stout and the creeps hurt really bad. So on Ursa, I'll go Windlace into Stout, and then pretty much rush phase boots as fast as possible in almost every scenario. I may buy a stick to deal with something like a Bat Rider or a Bristleback, but generally those phase boots just make you so much stronger. They buff up your attack damage with your overpower synergy, and they also just make it so you can hit the person. Items to consider are Orb of Venom against melee heroes that you have easy time catching up to, because once you catch up to them, they're really in trouble. That slow's just super nice for Ursa and allows him to maybe not even level his Urshock. He can just max his 2 damage output abilities, and if he hits you once, you're, pretty much dead. But once you're past the phase boots, pretty much what I say about Ursa is you need 1 sustain item or blink. And the blink is something where you feel like if I buy a really early blink, I've been seeing Ursas with like 8.5, 9-minute blinks. And that's why I really like having all the regen at the start, because it gives you that option. If you don't go as much regen to begin the game, then you're kind of more forced into your decision making of I need to go some regen item like Vanguard, Vlads, or Helm of the Dominator. I'm more in favor of Vlads for the most part. Even sometimes like a casual headdress can be good enough to hold you off till blink. But the Vlads helps you Roche. Helm of the Dominator helps you Roche too. But for the most part, I do believe Vlads is just best in the current meta because of the nerfs to Helm Dom. But in the future, if Helm Dom does get buffed again, or, Vlads gets nerfed or something of that nature, then I believe that it should be strongly considered that Helm of the Dominator is a good option on Ursa, because it doesn't really need the stats, and he just needs something to help him sustain, and the creep can tank Roche for him. With that being said, you're pretty much going to have a sustain item and a blink. That's going to be your first two major items. And a lot of people say, why not just like casual Morbid Mask? What does Vlads do more than Morbid Mask? Well, Vlads gives you that nice mana regen that Ursa so much needs. And it's also like just a tower pushing item with the aura on your creeps, as well as, you know, if you're pushing with your team, giving your team that benefit. The Morbid Mask, in my opinion, is not enough in most circumstances to sustain with Ursa. I would much rather buy a headdress first in almost every circumstance, unless I'm trying to rush a Roshan. And for the most part, I don't believe that's a good idea. Roshan's something that shouldn't be forced. It's like if they leave the area, then you should look for it, but you shouldn't itemize in order to rush it as fast as possible. And I'm just, you know, commenting that on the impact that it has on your item decision making. So Blink's more of like, I see a hero that needs to die, or a hero that I can just keep off the map, because if I have Blink, they have to stay away from me. And Vlads is more of a farming, threatening Roshan, threatening towers kind of item. And that just decides what order you're going to build the two items. So past that, items to consider. Something like a Midas, if you feel like the game's going to slow down a lot, and you feel like you have the items you currently need. Ursa's a hero that, like I said in the intro, doesn't really farm all that much past the early stages of the game, or at least he doesn't farm very fast. So Midas, if you feel like the game's going to slow down and you still want to scale into the late game decently, and you feel like you can still put the pressure on and threaten Roshan and all that jazz, then Midas is a good option. Other items that are strongly considered are Ags, when they have instant lockdowns that you need to deal with and you don't think you will be able to react to because they're just instant. Basher offers you the solo kill potential as well as initiation and team fights. You almost always get a bash because of overpower. Most heroes, unless it's like a Puck or an Ember Spirit, aren't able to react to you in the first 3 or 4 hits. They're just going to, you know, eat 3 or 4 hits, which is almost a guaranteed stun. And most heroes in the early to mid game will die to a Blink Basher Ursa if they are bashed. So past that, you know, you can look to build into the Abyssal. Pretty much every game you're going to want a BKB and or an Ags. Those are just such crucial items. Items to consider are Manta against heroes like Treant Protector, Silencer if you don't need a BKB. Manta, I think, is an underbought item. You're only buying it for the active, though. His illusions suck, but if they have roots like Ember Spirit, it can be really useful. You don't want to have to like ult or BKB out of those. Another item to consider is Silver Edge, really good against heroes like Spectre, you know, Abaddon, stuff that just has really important passives that make it really useful for Ursa. I just saw Pycat go it today in a game with Navi against Vega, against an Abaddon Spectre very specifically. I do believe that item's underrated. Desolator, after your Blink, is another item to consider, something that makes it so you're a much stronger tower hitter and just more of damage. You're basically saying, I don't need a BKB, and my team doesn't need lockdown, and we probably need tower damage. It's just a great item for that combination of times. I see a lot of other players favor Desolator much more than myself, and I think it's not a bad item. It's kind of like overkill most of the time. You're usually doing enough damage to kill them or not. Just makes you kill them faster. It does help a lot with building damage, as well as bursting really tanky targets, if you think it's going to make the difference there. Other items to consider are Diffusal for Ghost Scepters, as well as, you know, something like a Darkseer, MKB against Evasion. Butterfly is actually like a really nice 4th or 5th item for Ursa in some cases because of the movement speed burst in team fights, as well as like the, you know, the overall damage output. Even though he doesn't benefit all that much from attack speed because of overpower, it still does give a lot of damage, survivability, and the mobility that Ursa, you know, really needs. Bloodthorn can be a late game consideration. Sheepstick can be a late game consideration for heroes you just need to shut down with their abilities. Satanic, if you feel like you're going to need to, you know, survive burst and then pull yourself back together. Refresher for the double ult, double BKB can be really potent as a 6th item, something that you should consider. And past that, like, I don't think there's really any other items to consider. There are, you know, Heart of Trask very rarely, in case you just need to survive the initiation. A Soul Cuirass, if you feel like you need to offer that aura to your team, but a lot of times you want other heroes to offer that to you. And something I'm going to do in this video that's unique, that I haven't done before, is talk about Ursa itemization around him. Something that every carry should think about, and that everyone should think about when they have a carry. So basically, if I didn't mention the item, I don't think it's good. just to make that very clear. Stuff like Mask of Madness really sucks because he doesn't want to be silenced, and any other item is hyper situational. But when you're looking at an Ursa, the way that he plays out is that he goes in and then he tries to kill somebody and he has no way to get out. So building items for Ursa, if you're a teammate of Ursa, and if you're an Ursa player, maybe asking your teammates to build, is stuff like Glimmer Capes, Force Staffs, Lotus Orbs, stuff that either protect him while he's in there or help him get out. Those are just the problems that Ursa has, is the disengage portion. Because of the way overpower works and the way that Ursa gets kited, his best way to play the game out and itemize is such that he can go in, hit somebody, get out, and then hit somebody again later by blinking back in. Because blink and overpower have about the same cooldown. So usually it's like overpower, blink, and then back off, and then overpower, blink again. And the problem that Ursa has is backing off in the first place. So his teammates should really look to itemize to help him in that course. Like, I just don't think Ursa can afford to buy any of the items like Force Staff for himself. He just has to have the other items. So I think that's a really huge problem I have in my pubs. I see people just not itemize for me. And whenever I have an Ursa on my team, I always try to build those types of items for the exact reasons that I've stated. Another item that I make sure people know that I think is garbage is Echo Saber. Completely desynergizes, wastes a charge of overpower, and Echo Saber is an item that helps you hit people again after you've hit them once. Ursa has the first problem of hitting people first. Like, the first time he hits you is the problem. He has to get on top of you first. So Ursa wants all these items that help him get on top of you and then, stay immune to stuns like Ags or BKB or Basher, so he locks you in place. Another item to consider, something I did forget, is Mjolnir against like illusion heroes, because Ursa's nice that he blinks in, and if he's like tanking, he can just, Mjolnir active. That's really strong. When you're itemizing against Ursa, something that I also haven't included in past videos for carry guides, and things that you should look out for as a carry player as Ursa, meaning that these are items you should be wary of. It's important to know that your overpower is purgeable. So that means that if you use overpower and then somebody uses you or diffusal blades you, you're not going to have it anymore. So you should really pay attention to what heroes have those items. You should also pay attention to Yule Scepters and such, because if you ult and then get Yules, that's completely useless. So it's really important to realize those type of items that deal with Ursa. Scotty can be really annoying, because anything that helps kite you and anything that disables you during your ult and anything that purges your overpower is just really obnoxious to deal with as an Ursa player. And against Ursa, Force Staffs, Solar Crest. Like I said, Ursa goes in once and then he gets out, or wants to get out and go back in. So as an opponent of Ursa and as an Ursa player, you should be looking out for these items. It's really important to build items that, nullify Ursa's initial jump into the middle of the fight. And I usually talk about team fight approaching in a separate video, but I wanted to include it in the itemization portion of this course because of the fact that so much of Ursa's gameplay has to do with his items, and that's all about his approach to team fights. So I think I've covered everything that ranges from the enemy team's perspective and Ursa's perspective. This applies to team fights, pickoffs, just the way the entire hero operates, and that will affect your itemization, the items that you should be looking out for on the enemy team, and the items that your teammates can look to build to help you do your job better. And it doesn't hurt to ask them to help you build these items. It's not something where, maybe they're not going to listen to you every time, but it's really important to understand that when you have an Ursa or you are Ursa, that's how it's going to play out, and that's how, items need to help you. So with that being said, that wraps up my item course, and I hope you guys enjoyed this Ursa itemization guide and can really apply it and crush some pubs.